In 1958, the United States Air Force had a secret plan. Not to land on the moon, not to build a base, but to detonate a nuclear bomb on it. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This was Project A119. And for 40 years, nobody knew it existed. The year is 1957. The Cold War is at its peak. Two superpowers are locked in a battle for global dominance. Not with bullets, but with technology, with propaganda, with fear. And on October 4th, everything changed. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 into orbit, the world's first artificial satellite, a 184-pound metal sphere circling the Earth every 96 minutes, beeping a simple radio signal that could be heard by anyone with a receiver. To the American public, it was a nightmare come true. The Soviets hadn't just reached space first. They'd proven they could deliver a payload anywhere on Earth, including American soil. The US needed to respond, and fast. But what they came up with was almost unthinkable. To understand why anyone would want to nuke the moon, you need to understand the psychology of 1957 America. For over a decade, Americans had lived with the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Children practiced duck and cover drills. Families built bomb shelters. But there was one comfort: the vast oceans protecting America from Soviet bombers. Sputnik destroyed that comfort in an instant. The R-7 rocket that launched Sputnik was, fundamentally, an intercontinental ballistic missile. If it could put a satellite in orbit, it could put a warhead in Washington, or New York, or Los Angeles. The American response was less than impressive. On December 6, 1957, the US Navy's Vanguard rocket exploded on the launch pad. The tiny 3-pound satellite it was carrying rolled away into the bushes, still transmitting its pathetic signal. The press called it Kaputnik and Stayputnik. Meanwhile, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2, this time with a passenger, Laika, a dog. They were advancing rapidly, and the whole world was watching. The US military was desperate. They needed something big, something visible, something that would make the world forget about Sputnik. And that's when someone at the Air Force Special Weapons Center had an idea. In May 1958, the Air Force quietly contracted the Armor Research Foundation at the Illinois Institute of Technology. The project leader was Leonard Reifel, a respected physicist. The official title was innocuous: a study of lunar research flights. But the actual objective was anything but innocent. The plan was elegantly simple: launch a missile carrying a nuclear warhead, aim it at the moon, detonate it at the terminator, that thin line between the moon's light and dark sides. Why the terminator? Because a dust cloud there, backlit by the sun, would be visible from Earth, with the naked eye, a flash of light that billions of people could see, an undeniable demonstration of American power. The team initially considered a hydrogen bomb, but there was a problem. The missiles of 1958 couldn't carry that much weight to the moon, so they settled on something smaller: the W-25 warhead, 1.7 kilotons, about 1/10 the power of the Hiroshima bomb. But even a small nuclear explosion in the vacuum of space would create something never seen before. Enter a 24-year-old graduate student named Carl Sagan. Yes, that Carl Sagan. Sagan's job was specific and crucial. He had to calculate exactly how the dust cloud would expand in the moon's low gravity and vacuum. How big would it grow? How long would it last? Most importantly, would people on Earth actually see it? Think about that for a moment. One of history's greatest science communicators, a man who would dedicate his life to the peaceful exploration of space, spent months calculating how to make a nuclear explosion on the moon as visible as possible. Sagan was brought onto the project by his mentor, astronomer Gerard Kuiper. Together with Reifel and a team of 10 scientists, they produced 9 classified monthly reports for the Air Force. The science was meticulous. They calculated blast yields, crater sizes, radiation patterns. They even considered whether the explosion might help detect microbial life on the moon. But make no mistake, the scientific benefits were window dressing. As Rifle would later admit, the project had one sole design: to show the world that America could do something ambitiously spectacular. It was propaganda, pure and simple. But as the team worked through the calculations, the problems began to mount. First, there was the launch itself. Rocket technology in 1958 was unreliable. The US had already suffered multiple public failures. What if the missile carrying a nuclear warhead failed during launch? Or worse, what if it fell back to Earth? The warhead would detonate, somewhere, maybe over the ocean, maybe over a city. The political fallout would be catastrophic, literally. Then there were the scientific concerns. The moon was pristine, untouched, a natural laboratory that had remained unchanged for billions of years. A nuclear explosion would contaminate it with radioactive material. Future missions would have to deal with that contamination. Scientific observations would be compromised forever. But perhaps the biggest risk was political. How would the world react? The moon didn't belong to America. It didn't belong to anyone. It was a symbol shared by all humanity. Poetry, romance, navigation, timekeeping. Every culture on Earth had stories about the moon, and America wanted to nuke it. Rifle himself later said that if the project had been made public at the time, there would have been an outcry. The project could backfire spectacularly. Instead of demonstrating strength, it might show the world that America had lost its mind. But here's where the story gets even stranger. The Americans weren't the only ones with this idea. The Soviets had their own secret project, E4. Led by physicist Yakov Zeldovich, they were planning almost exactly the same thing: a nuclear detonation on the moon, a show of force, a propaganda victory. The similarities were uncanny. Both projects used similar yield weapons. Both targeted the lunar terminator for maximum visibility. Both were driven by the same Cold War paranoia. And both projects were cancelled for the same reasons. The Soviets were terrified of a launch failure. Imagine a nuclear warhead falling on Poland, or China, or back on Soviet territory itself. The international incident would be unprecedented. Ironically, Zeldovich, who proposed the project, was also the one who killed it. He realized the risks were simply too great. In January 1959, after 9 months of study, Project A119 was officially cancelled. The Air Force concluded that the risks outweighed any possible benefits. But there was another factor, a bigger factor. America was changing its strategy. Instead of demonstrating power through destruction, they would demonstrate it through achievement. Instead of leaving a crater on the moon, they would leave a footprint. The space race was shifting from military posturing to civilian exploration. NASA was established in 1958. The Apollo program was taking shape. A manned lunar landing would be far more impressive than a nuclear explosion. It would show technological superiority without the moral complications. It would inspire rather than terrify. The final nails in the coffin came in the 1960s. The Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963 prohibited nuclear explosions in space. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 went further, banning all weapons of mass destruction beyond Earth's atmosphere. For 40 years, Project A119 remained hidden. The reports were classified. Most were destroyed in 1987. The scientists involved were sworn to secrecy. But in the 1990s, writer K. Davidson was researching a biography of Carl Sagan, and he found something odd. In 1959, applying for a scholarship, young Carl Sagan had listed his recent work, including 2 papers: Possible Contribution of Lunar Nuclear Weapons Detonations to the Solution of Some Problems in Planetary Astronomy, and Radiological Contamination of the Moon by Nuclear Weapons Detonations. Sagan had accidentally revealed the existence of a classified project. When Davidson's biography was published, it prompted Leonard Rifle to break his silence. In 2000, he wrote to the journal Nature, confirming the project's existence. His words were damning. "I was horrified that such a gesture to sway public opinion was ever considered." Freedom of information requests followed. Documents were declassified. The secret was out. The world learned that at the height of the Cold War, America had seriously planned to nuke the moon. But let's imagine for a moment that it had happened. May 1959. Millions of people around the world look up at the first quarter moon. And then, a flash. A brief, brilliant point of light at the terminator. A slowly expanding cloud of dust and debris glowing in the sunlight. The immediate reaction would be shock or fear. The United States had just detonated a nuclear weapon on a celestial body. The implications would be staggering. The moon would be forever changed. A new crater, perhaps 300 feet across. Radioactive contamination spreading across the landing sites that Apollo would later visit. Future lunar colonies dealing with our atomic legacy. The space race would take a darker turn. If America could nuke the moon, what else could they do? Would the Soviets respond with their own demonstration? Would space become the ultimate high ground for nuclear weapons? But perhaps the greatest impact would be psychological. For all of human history, the moon has been a symbol of the unreachable, the divine, the romantic. Every culture has myths about it. Lovers swear by it. Poets write about it. And we would have bombed it. Instead of Armstrong's words, "one giant leap for mankind," we would remember the day humanity announced its presence in the cosmos with an act of destruction. Project A119 remains one of the Cold War's strangest chapters. A plan so absurd it sounds like fiction. Yet it was real. Funded, researched, nearly executed. It represents a moment when fear and rivalry pushed humanity to consider the unthinkable. When the desire to win overshadowed basic questions of right and wrong. Today, the moon remains untouched by human warfare, a reminder that even at our worst moments, humanity can still choose better. But declassified documents remind us how close we came, how thin the line is between wisdom and folly.